Hey everybody. So we're going to be talking about clustering, and in this example here, we're going to be looking at dendrograms. And uh, when we get to that, I'll kind of show you a visual of what I'm talking about. But essentially, what we want to do is take a group of data points, listing room types. So we have room types, and then we have categories that pertain to those room types. So if you're and those categories are the categories that you would find in Revit. So this is a database that we can extract from Revit. Um, and the idea is that you can apply this to hundreds of models at a time, pull that information in and try to learn from it. So clustering itself is not a widely used method. Generally, you're using a supervised method. Clustering is a non-supervised method. Typically, you're not really working with non-labeled data, and that's what clustering does really well. The way that we're going to use clustering and what is typical in how folks use it is we're going to try to learn a little bit more about the data. So we're going to see some of these room types, how they connect to one another, just to give us more insights into the data itself. So I'll be doing this in Jupyter Notebook. If you're not familiar with that, it's a really nice interface for running little chunks of code at a time. It's really great to explain and see kind of what's going on. I definitely recommend checking it out. And if you are interested in using it and kind of following along, then go out to the Anaconda distribution. Look that up, and depending on if you're on a Mac or Windows, they have downloads for both, and also Linux, I think. So check that out. It'll download majority of the data science libraries, and then it'll also give you access to this and whatnot. So it's definitely a useful tool to check out, and so that you don't have to install every single package that you may or may not run into. So currently what you see on this Jupyter Notebook is kind of a template that I put together. This template generally is out of date if it's pertains to a project. Like you can see up here, this is a project number, so it's 19. So anything before that is out of date. What I usually do is when I'm working on a project, I'll find some useful links and then I'll put it in the overall template. And then from there, any new projects that I create, I use that template to start with. So depending on the video you see, you may see this this template a little bit different. And I'll share this this notebook with you as well so that you can take it. But I pretty much just fill in a variety of different, just different information that I may want to go back to at some point. Some of the common things that I go to quite a bit, like Stack Overflow, the Python documentation, stuff like that. You can use Markdown if you come up here in the Jupyter or in the Jupyter Notebook. You have an option to turn these cells into code, Markdown, raw, and NVC, and then headings. But for this, like what we're seeing here right now, this is Markdown. So these are just some quick links just to check out and see how to do different things. If I just need a reference, some code, packages, some stuff that pertains to Pandas, which is a package, and then some stuff that pertains to Plotly, and I'm always updating this. All right, so let's get into it. So we have the documentation or just reference. So it's data science foundations, data mining, clustering, and Python. This is a resource I recommend just checking out in case you want to learn a little bit more when it comes to clustering within Python. And then what we're going to look at here is importing the libraries that we're going to be working with. So in this example, we're going to be importing Pandas. Pandas is as you see here, it's a data analyst and manipulation tool. and it's built on top of the Python programming language. If you want to see more information, this is a direct quote, or it comes right out of their website. So definitely check out Pandas' website and their documentation if you want to learn more about Pandas. It's definitely a really useful library. The other library we're going to be using, at least for the matplotlib portion of this, is matplotlib and then pyplot, and then a little bit of information on that here. And then the second one that we're going to, or the third library that we're going to use for creating the clustering is this SciPy cluster hierarchy, and then the dendrogram, and then linkage. So if you want to learn more information on that, just search SciPy and then cluster. I'm not going to run this import dev panda, but I definitely recommend, if you're newer to pandas, I use it quite a bit. I definitely recommend checking it out. It's pretty much a help. It helps you with your code. So, if you're using pandas, you run something leveraging the panda library, and you may be using it wrong or doing this, or there may be a better way to optimize it. It'll give you hints on how to do that. So definitely recommend checking that out. So to import these libraries, since we already have them installed, all I got to do is do Shift Enter. That runs that block of code there, and then we can skip this dev panda one. And now we need to build that database. So this is a pandas function, and what we can do here is create that database. So we say RoomData _ PLT, and this, I just do _ PLT just to remind me that this is a matplotlib example that we're working on currently. So now what I'll do is I'll say that equals to pandas, that PD. So we see up here, import pandas as PD. It's just a shorter version of pandas, so we don't have to type pandas out the whole time. So we do PD dot read Excel, and that's going to read this single room data. And the reason why I named that is because in this example, we only have 5 data points. In another future video where we're going to be working with Azure Machine Learning, I'm actually going to be using somewhere around 200 or so data sets, and then videos after that will actually use a live data set. But in this example, 5 rows, and we'll kind of take a look at that the further we get into this code. So I'll do Shift Enter. So now we have that data, and we can actually see what that data frame looks like. So we'll do we'll just type out that RoomData PLT or _ PLT, and then to Shift Enter, and now we can see what's going on. So we have the index over here, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. If you're familiar with data science or computers, 1 starts at 0, so there's 5 inputs here. And then our columns, so we have room type, and then that's the break room, classroom, lobby, personal office, and then patient room. And then up here we have the categories that pertain to those rooms. And the premise behind this is to try to identify connections between those rooms and just have a little bit more insight into the connectivity of those different room types and how they play into a building. We have these. All I did was I essentially created these, and then and it's not every Revit category, but I created them, and then I added some numbers to them. And then what we've done is we're trying to then find the relationship between them. And you can see break room just has 10s in it, and actually the entire thing does. Whereas classroom and lobby both have 25, but this one has 20 in the ducts, 30 in that. Again, this is supposed to be a really simple, basic look at leveraging this Plotly library and matplotlib library and seaborn, just so that you can kind of get the grasp of it. And then from there, you can start to use larger data sets. But again, when you get a hold of this, there's just 5 inputs. You can add more things to that if you like. So now what we're going to do is just get a little bit insights into what's going on there. And we can actually look at this. There's not a lot of data points here, so we can kind of get an idea that, okay, break room kind of is on its own because it has 10s in all the categories, And classroom has 25. So does lobby, except for down here they have 20 and 30. So these two might have a relationship with one another. And then personal office and patient room may as well have a relationship with one another. So when we get to actually clustering this information together and trying to see where the relationships are, we could try to get, we can actually see that happen. And you could see where maybe if you have 1,000 inputs where something like this could come in handy. So we'll do an index. So we'll just get the index. And the reason why we're doing this is that I'll show you further, because we need to change the index. We actually need to read, we want the index to be reading the room types instead of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So here we're just getting an idea of what that index is. So we can see here it's a range. It starts at 0, stops at 5, steps 1. So it's just, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And now what we can do is come down here, and now all we want to do is get just a visual count of what's going on here. So so we have the value of patient room, that's 1, classroom, personal office, lobby, and break room. And then that data type is an integer 64. So now if we go into this one, so we list that room underscore PLT again. And what this does is gives us a list of the categories. So all the different categories and then what they are. So we have room type, air terminal, and then so on for the rest of it. Down here, what we want is to see, or actually here is just a few other examples of doing the exact same thing. So you could list out, list roomdata.columns, which give you the same, roomdata underscore plt.columns give you the same, and then this one as well will give you the same output. Now what we need to do is, again, we want to make these room type inputs as the index. So down here, we're actually going to do that. So we'll do RD, which is just another, it's we're essentially saying room data, but it's just I'm using RD instead. And then we'll do equal room data underscore PLT. And then we'll say PLT.column. And then down here, we're going to do RD dot index equals room data underscore PLT dot ILOC or ILOC. I can't remember how you say that. And then we're going to step from 0 and then fill those, or start from 0 and then fill those indexes with the room data or the room type information. So we'll go ahead and press enter here, and then we'll do a rd.index. You can see now our index is the break room, and the data type is actually an object now, whereas before the index was actually an integer, which was the zeros 1, 2, 3, 4. So now and now down here you can see it's actually an object. So we have break room, classroom, and then what we can do is we can simply print that out. So up here we can add another cell. So we click that little plus symbol, it'll add a cell below, and then we can do RD and then press enter, which is just room data. And then now you can see that the room type is our index, and then all the categories. Down here, if you want to learn a little bit more about the linkage, so essentially we're kind of linking the information together and trying to get an idea of the relationships between them. But if you do want to learn a little bit more information about that, because there's a lot more info on that particular topic, definitely come out to this link. It'll take you out to the page talking specifically about what we're doing here. So we do that here. We do Z equals linkage, room data, and then Ward. And Down here, what we're going to do is essentially create. So let's run this block of code. And then now what we're going to do is configure that plot so that we can see that information. So all this information is more or less configuring that plot. So we're doing PLT for the matplotlib, and we're going to figure the fig size, which is 30 and 10 for now. And what we'll do is add a title, so plt.title, building groups, and then for the Y label, we're actually not going to give it a label. And then we're going to do, and we don't, I did this because I didn't want it defaulting to just putting a Y there. So I went in there and said plt.ylabel, and then just had it empty. And now we'll do our dendrogram, and we're saying, the data, the Z, and then, which is up here, and then the labels. So we're going to say equals rd.index, and then down here we are, and the index, which you remember earlier we kind of configured, is this break room, classroom, lobby. And then now the leaf rotation, which we'll configure that a little bit and change it, and I'll show you what that does. The leaf font size, we'll change that as well. And then now we'll simply just run that block, and then we'll see what's going on. So what we kind of looked at before was we said break room was off by itself, and it kind of is. It's grouped over here, and then it's grouped kind of off in the middle by itself. Classroom and lobby, which is these two inputs we were looking at, and thought, okay, there's a relationship there, and that's what this is found as well, that there is a relationship between classroom and lobby. Same thing for the personal office and patient room. When it comes to these plots, there's a lot of things you can do in matplotlib. There's also a lot of things you can do in a lot of these libraries. So this is just a basic view of what this plot looks like, but there's a lot of things that you can do with these. You can make them look incredibly professional, have them hosted up on a site somewhere or something, but this is just the basics of this plot. So what we can do is go in here and for the leaf rotation, let's change that to 20, and then maybe change the size to 30, and then we'll press enter. And we can see here that it actually changes the rotation of them, and then it also changed the size for this example. So you can kind of configure these and mess with them. There's a lot of other things that you can do, so I definitely recommend checking out their site and looking at the gallery of all the different plots that they have. Definitely check those out and see what best suits what you're trying to do. So now let's get into the Plotly portion. So essentially we're going to be doing the exact same thing. This is a little bit easier, so we're just going to kind of go through this real quick since we've already stepped through a lot of this. So we're going to import this library, so this plotly.figurefactory as FF. Again, we're doing FF just to be shorter than actually typing out the whole library itself. And then we're going to bring in this data set, which is RoomData _ Plotly. So what we'll do is press enter, and then and the reason why I named this different is just so we can keep it separate, and it makes a little bit more sense. Sometimes I do this. I'll do RoomData _ Plotly _ DP. That just means drop. I'll add some descriptions to it if I'm stepping through it in a way. That way I can always come back to this original one. I can add a cell below it. I can sit here and plot this, and then I can see the information. And then this data here, so I'm doing RoomData _ Plotly.drop. So I'm actually dropping a column. So I'm dropping the room type column, and then and that's actually equals 1. So I'm dropping this column here. And if I run that, come back, add another cell, I can take this, plot that, and kind of see what's going on. So looking at this data set, I can say, okay, this is what I wanted to do. This was the original one. So sometimes I do rename these. So it's really up to you. I'll add an underscore and another descriptive point to them if I've done another thing, like maybe a transpose or something like that. Or sometimes I just leave them as just room data underscore something, like I did in the above example with matplotlib. So now what we'll do is we've got the data set good to go. So we do need to come in here and say names equals. So we're going to do names equals break room, classroom, because it has some issues with the object type. So it needs to be an integer. So, but we can define that information later by saying names equals break rooms, classrooms, lobby, personal office, patient room. And then what we're going to do is fig equals ff.create dendrogram, and then room data Plotly DP, which is that data set we just created. And then the color threshold, we have that as an option. We also have the labels as an option here as well. There's a variety of different other functions you could do. Definitely check out their website and kind of see what else you can add to it. And then down here is the actual layout, so the width and height. And actually, I did not touch on that, but that's what this is here, the fig size. This is the width and height as well. So you can configure this and change it up. Or I think it's the height and width maybe. I can't remember. But you can change that here if you want to change this plot to be a little bit different. So if we scroll back down here, we have the width and height. We're just going to leave that as is. Now we're going to do fig.show, which is going to show us our plot that we just created. So now we have this plot. We have it's grouping everything the same way. So we can see personal, office, patient room, break room, classroom, and lobby. And what's really cool and what I really like about Plotly, so matplotlib is a older library, and it is it's in some instances not the greatest in comparison to some of these other libraries such as Seaborn and Plotly. But like this particular plot is actually interactive, so you can see we can actually come in here and interact with this plot. We can come up here, we can click that pan sign, pan around. There's this zoom function which we were just on. There's even a download plot as a PNG, which is pretty cool. We have a pan, or we already looked at that. We have these little zoom out and zoom in buttons here. There's also this auto scale, which will scale it back to the scale of the entire plot. We have reset axes, and there's a number of other options here too. So definitely check this out because this tool is awesome. I've done a lot of other plots with Plotly that have been really cool to interact with. Some 3D ones for plotting data points and stuff. So it's definitely a really cool tool to check out. I think, yeah, so here's a link for just the dendrograms, but if you wanted to check out some of the other options or plots that they have a gallery out there as well that you can kind of see the different thing or the different plots, and then also it'll have some example code too, so definitely check that out. So now let's check the seaborn. So this again, it will be a pretty quick one. So we're going to import the library, and now what we're going to do is room data underscore seaborn equals PD read Excel. And we're actually going to have to look at the data quite a bit because we have to do a whole bunch of stuff to actually get it to read correctly in the clustering plot. So this is typical. So this is our room data. Excuse me. So this is the data just brought straight in as a data frame from Pandas or from Excel. So now what we need to do is come in here and we need to change the index around. And what I'm going to do is just run this code and we can talk about it. So like we did earlier with the index, what we need to do here is remove the index and make the room type as the index. And then what I want to do is actually rotate this around. And so we'll do a transpose, which is just a room data underscored seaborn equals RD, which is something we described or that we created up here, which I did not mention. So we did RD dot equals or RD equals room data. So we created another data frame there. So RD, which we ran here. You can see the differences between the two. So now what we want to do is do rd.t, which is just transpose those, but we're actually going to do RoomData underscore seaborn. And this is an example of like naming this data set differently so we don't overwrite this information and we can still plot this the way it is to come in here, add an underscore and maybe a t, just to give us some information that we transpose that. So now what we'll do is press shift and enter, and now we can see what's going on here. So we have the break room. So let's oops, yeah, sorry about that. I forgot to come in here and rename this RoomData underscore seaborn with that T at the end of it. So now if we run that, we can see what's going on. So we have the room type over here, and then this is actually going to be the title. So it doesn't pertain to actually this bit of information here. So this is all the categories, and then we have break room, classroom, lobby, personal office, and patient room. So now we'll simply create that cluster map from seaborn, and it looks like we got an error. So what we can do is simply read this out. So we can say, okay, string could not convert string to float. All right, so it looks like I messed up again. So what we'll do is add that underscore T, and then we'll press enter again. Right here as well. So underscore T, and then now what we can do is run that plot, and we can kind of see what's going on here. So I really like this one. I think it's really clear on what's going on and what the relationship is between these different room types. And what's interesting is if you do happen to have hundreds of data sets, this actually might be a little bit more complex to read. But I think, depending on the size and the parameters involved, you may get insights or not. So that's why some of this is just kind of playing around with different plots and seeing what best works for you and for the audience that you're trying to present this to. But in this example, over here to the right, you can see all the different categories, and they kind of align with the little bars over here. So you can see that these two here, so that means telephone, sprinklers, all this information is this kind of matches up with the classroom and lobby. Same for the personal office and patient room, or I mean, it's different. It's a little bit different between these two spaces. So between a personal office, patient room, classroom, and lobby, they're all different, and also break room. All the information here that pertains to telephone, sprinklers, security devices, planning, and so on, are all different between these. But the relationship that makes lobby and classroom stick together is that cable trays, air terminals, casework, all these above categories are kind of have the same relationship between one another, so between classroom and lobby. Same for the patient room and personal office. And then for the room type, since that's entirely different than every other room type, so the break rooms room type is different than any other. It only has 10s in it, so it's kind of off on its own. And you can see it groups it in the exact same way as all the other two plots that we plotted earlier. So we can see personal office, patient room are grouped together. We can see the break room is kind of off by itself. We can see classroom, lobby are together there. So again, to recap this, the whole idea behind, clustering this information or trying to find relationships into this is to, maybe try to get a better insight into how your data plays with one another. Is there a connection between this room type or this? Is there a connection between building types and this? Or, maybe you want to look at teams and profitability. What's the relationship between that? There's a lot of things that you can do with this, and it starts with just really playing with it, understanding your audience and what are you trying to get out of it. So again, check out those websites. I think you'll find that there's a lot of great information out there on them. It's really simple to get these started. I created the data set, and a lot of this was just spending a lot of time on these 3 sites. So the Seaborn site, I was going out to Seaborn, looking up some of the different plots and options that they had, going out to the Plotlis site, and then the matplotlib site, and just kind of seeing what's out there, seeing what I can do, what I can't do, and just playing around with it. So check it out. Feel free to use this notebook. I'll also give you the data set as well. You'll find that in the OneDrive. It'll be below in the description. You'll find a OneDrive link to this information. Just take that, and you can use this information and run this the same exact way. If you have any trouble, let me know. It should work. I've used all the latest libraries, and a lot of this stuff's pretty basic, so it should be able to run pretty easily. So let me know if you have any questions, if you have any problems, if you want to learn a little bit more and just want to talk, feel free to reach out to me. But I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you in the next one.